It is very difficult to introduce Father Peter Cameron because he's got a 30-page CV, which takes a lot of time to go through. But I'll try to give some highlights because if I went through his amazing background, it would be longer than the interview that we're going to have. So Father Peter was ordained as a Dominican in 1986. He holds a Master's of Fine Arts. Now, you put those things together, his ordination to be a Dominican and his Master of Fine Arts, and he ends up establishing the Black Friars Repertory Theater in New York City. In addition, he holds a licentiate in sacred theology. And for our purposes of the greatest interest was that he has taught homiletics in 5 seminaries, including St. Joseph Dunwoody, New York, and currently he is the chair of homiletics at the Pontifical North American College in Rome. And he also teaches at the Angelicum, and he was the founder of the and chief editor of the Magnificat. He is now the editorial director of Alitalia. Oh, and did I mention in his spare time, he wrote 10 books. Here's one of them, notably, Why Preach? So if you want to know the rest, that's scratching the surface. He's got a 30-page CV, which you can find online. Father, thank you so much for taking the time.
It's a great joy to be with you, Deacon Peter. Thank you.
So, Father, you bring a lot of experience, not just as a preacher, but as a teacher of preachers. So you do the work of preaching, but you've done a lot of thinking about preaching, theoretical, and then also the practical aspects and how to teach it. And so, and since 1986, you have obviously preached many homilies, Sundays and daily homilies and funerals and so on. But for our purposes today, we are discussing that kind of homily that comes out of nowhere, that you never really wanted to give, that you're not sure when it's assigned to you or when you know you have to do it. How do I approach this? What do I do? Are there landmines? Is there a way getting out of this? So that's what we're talking about today. So, Father, could you describe a challenging preaching situation that you were in? Give us the context and some details about it.
Well, you and I, Peter, discussed the fact that the day of the Sandy Hook school shooting, which was December 14th, 2012, I was the Sunday supply priest at St. Rose of Lima Church, which for all intents and purposes served as a kind of ground zero for that terrible really massacre that happened in the Sandy Hook school. No one was allowed to go near the property of the school, and people needed to go somewhere. And in fact, 8 of the victims of the Sandy Hook school shooting were parishioners at St. Rose of Lima. So I think that's the reason why it became sort of the locus for people that just needed a place to express their sorrow and try to come to terms with this horrific atrocity that transpired in this beautiful, quaint, quiet New England town. So I'm sure people know the details of that terrible day, but it was a Friday, and a young man who himself had studied a couple of years at the parish school of St. Rose of Lima, for whatever reason, armed himself with many assault rifles and other forms of weapons, and killed 26 little children and school teachers, administrators, as well as his own mother and himself. So there were really 28 victims. And so this happened, as I say, at the beginning of Advent and on a Friday. And I, as the schedule turned out, was assigned to be the celebrant for the very first Mass early in the morning of the following Sunday. So I think it was an 8 a.m. Mass. And although I had an Advent homily already prepared, once this happened, I realized I I can't just, I have to say something about this. But what do you say? And it was extremely, not just trying, but it was a flabbergasting thing for me because I just couldn't believe that it had happened. So um, I that Sunday morning, usually the priest of the first Mass opens the church. So I went extra early to do that, unaware of the fact that the pastor very wisely had decided to leave the church open all of Saturday night because many people, as I say, were going there to pray. And I believe some of the priests on staff made themselves available for confessions and just to help the people who were present. But I arrived, well, as I tried to make my way there, the state troopers had actually closed off the exit to Newtown from the highway that I was traveling to get there. And thank God I knew enough about how to find the place in the back roads taking another exit. So I was even more, kind of nervous about what it was I was going to find when I got to the church. So when I got there, I discovered that the church was open, as I say, and I still was sort of in disarray in my mind about what I was actually going to talk about. So I met somebody who was praying in the church and had been there for some time. And when he saw me, he came up to me. And I remember he said to me something to the effect that, well, given this terrible thing that's happened this year, we better not have any Christmas. And I thought to myself instantaneously, that's exactly the wrong thing. It's just the opposite. That if there's any moment in which the only possible cure or antidote for a horrific ill is needed, it's right now. And the only thing that can be that cure is the Son of God becoming flesh in the incarnation at Christmas. So that became really the centerpiece of what I decided to preach, and that really sort of launched the homily for me because I had other things, other pieces of the homily, but I realized that if this was what was in the mind and the heart of this man, probably other people were sharing it too. And it's an experience. Sorry, I live right next to a highway. It was an experience of really sort of dismal hopelessness, of despair, that there's nothing adequate to provide for the human heart, the human soul, in a moment of such just utter suffering and affliction and desolation. Uh, and so I realized that uh, that could not win, and that the reality of God becoming flesh is greater than any evil that any malicious person can perpetrate. And that needed to be the message that was given to the people of God. I mean, I loved going to St. Rose of Lima on Sundays. I think I had been there already 3 years or so when this terrible thing happened. But it was, and I'm sure it still is, a community of very strong faith. And so it was not like this homily needed to encourage people to uh, to believe and to take up the faith of the church with new ardor. It was the fact that they already had it, and so the homily, I think, was really just an encouragement to live by faith and to trust in the faith that they had, and to let it not only to be a consolation for them, but this was an occasion for the people of St. Rose of Lima Parish to be witnesses to the world that evil and the powers of hell cannot win, even when little children have been slaughtered. And even when this happened on basically the eve of Christmas, when all of our thoughts and all of our energy is sort of engulfed in the joy of that miraculous event.
So, Father, you, first of all, for people who are watching this video, I'm going to be attaching a link at the end of this video, which will take you to a print text of the homily that Father Peter Cameron actually gave. So, Father, you came to that church this morning, that this terrible thing had happened. 20 children, all by the way, between 6 and 7 years old, had been shot. 6 adult staff members, and several of them were actually members of that particular parish that you were in. And so
Yes.
you come in, and there's this grieving. On top of all that, this is we're approaching Christmas. And on top of all that, you were preaching on the Sunday of all Sundays, Gaudate Sunday. So rejoice in the Lord. So this is uh, putting all of that together is certainly a tremendous challenge. But before we talk about how you actually approached it, was there anything else that, or was there any particular things that you felt that you needed to stay away from, or that you wanted to be sure you attended to, or just things that you were thinking about that were going to frame the parameters of the decisions that you made for the homily?
I knew that there was tremendous sensitivity about the young man who was the shooter, and that the situation was such that probably the people in that place could not bear to hear his name spoken. But at the same time, I realized that we couldn't sidestep the fact that this person who was part of this community was responsible for this, and that there was tremendous sorrow and brokenness in his own life that that probably led to these events. I mean, who knows? But I knew virtually nothing at that point. But I read everything I could get my hands on after the fact, and it took several months and even a couple of years before a lot of the facts came out. But this was a tortured man. So I knew that we had to address the fact that uh, he had been neglected, and not to place blame, but that was something that that was a priority for us in terms of mission, the mission that this horrible atrocity was sort of entrusting to us, to really be on the lookout for people who are lost, for people who are alone, for people who are unaccompanied, for people who are living in a kind of living hell, that prompted them to make choices that were going to be harmful not just to themselves but to other people. That we had to find them and help them and and be offer the friendship of Jesus Christ to them. So that was very strong in my heart.
So you wanted to address not just the situation and not just the victims, but also the perpetrator as a real human being with a dimension and background and everything else. So, Father, could you take us through then what decisions you made, how maybe the moves of the homily, or what you decided to put in or not put in? How did the homily then come together?
Well, obviously it was a long time ago, so I don't know that I can give you every particular element of it, but I knew that the temptation was to let the weight and the the horror of this event outshadow and outdistance everything, that it would not be possible to be joyful again. It would not be possible to believe again. It would not be possible to have any kind of, hopefulness again, given just how unspeakably evil this event was that had transpired, and that was still really just lacerating the lives of everyone in the town, not just the families, but all of the parishioners, and as I say, in a certain respect, the whole world, because it was the slaughter of little children. And so I decided that I would begin with that notion, because I think I said in the beginning of the homily that it's the first time in the history of salvation that the slaughter of the innocents happened before the actual feast. But just as the church celebrates the slaughter of the innocents as a mystery to behold and to contemplate and actually to venerate, that we are being called to something like that too. So as much as I felt drawn down into the utter desolation and the despair of this horrific event, I knew that we had to keep speaking truth to it. And the truths are simple, but they are profound, and they're life-giving, and they're transformative, that God is real, that he sent his son to us. He sent his son to save us from all the ravages of sin, even these sins, and that the presence of Jesus Christ and his ministry and his suffering and his death and his resurrection has actually destroyed death, and that we need to live with conviction, that truth. We have to live by faith, no matter how much the present circumstances conspire against us to keep us from believing anything. I mean, it was a moment when we as emotionally ridden and passion laced the moments and the hours and the days were. These were days to look to the cross and to look to the mysteries, to look to the manger, and to keep saying to God, I believe. I know that you love us, that you would never abandon us, that there's a purpose even in this, and that good can come from this, and that you would not forsake us. And so, Jesus, I trust in you. So the homily is basically a pleading with the hearers to believe those truths, especially when the temptation just to capitulate to despair might be strong.
And so you mentioned in the homily that conversation you had with someone about canceling Christmas, and so your whole point is no, not canceling Christmas. We need Christmas more than ever, and you've now just said this was sort of a plea, because there's certainly a plea to hold on to faith, because there's going to be certainly many people who might want to just give up on faith, or the basic, they're thinking that basic question, why did God permit this? Where the heck were their guardian angels? Aren't the guardian angels supposed to be on duty and helping out? Where are they? So all of those things. And so you made that plea. In the end, how effective do you evaluate the homily was from your own perspective, or and what kind of feedback you might have got from other people?
It's a very difficult thing to assess. Any homily is a very difficult thing to assess. But I mean, first of all, it was published, so I guess people thought that there was something in it that was worth reading. But another really almost sort of miraculous thing that happened as I was in the sacristy at this point, getting ready for the Mass, is that I looked in the doorway and there was a man standing there who I had never seen before. And something just told me, and I'm sure it was through the Holy Spirit, something just told me this man somehow is attached to this atrocity. And in fact, he was the husband of one of the teachers, the special education teacher who had died in the shooting. And he said to me, if you could have known my wife was the type of person who would never have allowed this shooter to get anywhere near her children. In fact, when they discovered her, her arms were wrapped around a little child, protecting him. And he said to me, my adult children are in the congregation and they're suffering badly. Can you please say something to them in the homily? And I honestly don't remember, Deacon Peter, what I said, but I knew that that was God using my priesthood and really giving me the charge not to pay any attention to my insecurities and my inabilities and my weaknesses and my limitations and all of those things, but simply to turn myself over to the mystery and to the power of faith, and just to put my heart with the heart of these young people who are sitting there and empathize with them, try to imagine what it was that was just ripping them apart, and to give them some assurance that that was not the end, that there was much more. And a very beautiful outcome of that, I learned some weeks later, was that this man was not super faithful in attending Mass every Sunday, and he began to do that, and apparently also started to go to weekday Mass, and he subsequently died of cancer. But this brought him back to his faith. I mean, this loss, this horrific loss of his wife, and just reflecting on the event that was mind-boggling for him, it became an occasion to really come to terms with God and to say yes to him and to make that yes permanent.
And in fact, there's a line in your homily where you tell the congregation that who knows, it may be the way that they are witnessing or experiencing this situation, that this may be actually an evangelical tool which will bring all kinds of people back to the faith. And you had that example in that particular person who God sent to you before, that was before the homily, the preaching. So
Right.
kind of God giving you some homiletic hints here, some pointers about what should be in your homily. Like, don't forget to address those people who are closest to that, and are intimately involved with the people who lost their lives that day. The fact that you got feedback like that shows that the homily had an effect, that the homily stayed, and the more so that the homily made a difference in people's lives. Father, for any new preacher, seminarians, and you teaching many seminarians, or diaconal candidates, people who are going to embark on this great commission, this great apostolate, that the church has told us is, the primary apostolate, the preaching, preaching of the word, and particularly homiletics. Any advice you would give them? Well, certainly there's all kinds of advice you can give for people who are preaching on a regular basis, a regular Sunday. But when something like something like this, something unexpected, it may be a terrible big tragedy like this one, or it may be something close to home, or something else. But it's when they hit a situation and they don't know what to do. Do you have any advice on preaching in particularly challenging situations?
I would say, first of all, that I really do try to impress on the seminarians that I teach that the effective preaching in the lives of especially believers, but really in everyone's life, is probably much greater than they imagine. That preaching can really make a difference and turn people around and give them hope and make them think about uh, their circumstances in a way that almost nothing else can. And so to have that sort of reverence for preaching and to really trust its power, that it's forceful, that there's a mightiness to preaching, and that as weak as the instrument of the preacher is and may be, that doesn't in any way interfere with the power of preaching. I mean, we see this from Moses and St. Paul and so many moderns who want to sort of wrangle with God and say, well, I'm not a very good speaker, or I don't really have those gifts. And that's not the point. Preaching itself, when it's entrusted to someone that God commissions to be his preacher, is life-changing. And so to really believe that. Practically, secondly, I would say that it's important to really pay attention to what is happening, even almost moment by moment. So of course we have to prepare, but that particular day, if I had been too wedded to a text or to a script that I had already decided, all right, this is what I'm going to preach about, and I had not incorporated the elements that happened in the church and in the sacristy, and just as I was kind of coming to awareness of what it was that actually happened. I mean, I was there the Friday, the evening of the shooting. I was there for the mass that happened in the parish, and that also was just an astonishing occasion because the church doesn't hold, I don't know how many, maybe 600 or 700 or something like that, or if even that, but there were easily 1,000 people in the church, or easily 1,000 people outside the church. The governor was there. There were other political people there. Katie Kirk was there. There are all sorts of people there. And I remember the pastor asked me to be one of the priests that brought Holy Communion to the people who were outside, who couldn't even get inside, but wanted to be there. And and not everyone that came was Catholic. So as I was walking through the crowds with the ciborium, with the 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 real presence of Jesus Christ in the host that I was holding in my fingers, you could see people's eyes light up, the eyes of believers, when they realized, well, that Christ was coming to them. And so that taught me that's what people need, and that's what the homily needs to be. And that has more to do with, just as I say, just sort of paying attention and not being too stuck on my own thoughts, and really surrendering to what the people in the moment really needed, and giving it to them. I would say also that no matter how desperate the situation, and there are some situations that are just, they're so painful and so hurtful that it's almost impossible even to speak about them without incurring that pain. But again, that in the crucifixion of Jesus Christ on Calvary, every kind of possible evil was taken up in the flesh of this man who St. Paul says he became sin for us. So we have to really believe that no matter how horrific the circumstances might be, and no matter how much they might contradict our sense that things can ever be normal again, we have to speak the truth that is setting us free, and allow that truth to set other people free. And And it simply means saying the true things with as much conviction as we can. I mean, the Catechism says in one very simple but beautiful line, we're put on this earth to believe and to hope and to love. I would say that. I would say that on this occasion or many other occasions in which people just feel eviscerated by the circumstances that are like torture to them. We can always believe, that's faith. We can always hope, that's the virtue of faith, and we can always love, that's charity. And these are the three things that last, and the greatest of these is love. And even if the priest himself is torn inside because his faith has been shaken, as we know from the great Saint Peter, that doesn't win. When we simply allow the when he collapsed in tears, that's when he got a new lease on life. And when you turn the pages of the gospel where Peter's running away from Calvary, and you turn to the pages of the Acts of the Apostles, it's like he's a completely different person. He's so filled with conviction. Well, that's because he believed and he hoped and he loved. He let the truth of the gospel really take hold of him instead of any other understanding or idea or thought or conception. I think those are the main things. I mean, there are so many controversial issues that we want to try to um, help people to see in a reasonable way so that they will come to live the truth as God himself makes it plain to us in his Son, who is the truth. But even if we can't change somebody's mind in a homily, we can show them that, and I think this is why Jesus says, I am the way and the truth and the life, not just one of them. We can show them the way, and we can show them the life, that there is a way of living that's full of peace, that's full of joy, that's full of real consolation. And the way is by just uniting ourselves to this man who wants to be so close to us. And through that experience, which is an experience of beauty, of being embraced, then we can start to live the truth. And that's why, Bishop Barron and other people say this very often, the way to bring people who are adamant against the faith for whatever reason, because they have a controversial idea or because they have had some catastrophic experience happen to them, we can begin to woo them into the truth by giving them this experience of beauty.
So, Father, you have encouraged preachers to speak the truth, to pin their homily on faith, hope, and love. And I know from your books that you do emphasize that a preacher prepare, that a preacher puts the time in and prepare. But at the same time, when the preparation is done, not to have it then sort of a finished product, but to be attentive to what's going on around you. And in the example you gave us in your case situation is you walk into the church and you meet somebody who says we should cancel Christmas, and that becomes a really important moment in the homily itself, because that chance meeting, or the chance meeting, well, the providential meeting you had in the sacristy, with the young man who was connected to. So that those things, if you're attentive to those things, you massage, and you'll be willing to change and go on a different direction if that's what God puts in front of you.
Yes, I think that this is really key, and it's a big trust in God, because I believe the Lord does this more often than not. That is to say, that he will he will, quote unquote, interrupt our lives with people's problems or people's concerns or things that are happening, or turns of events that we weren't anticipating, but really need to be given some attention and focus, and to be spoken about, and to be spoken about in a gospel way. That is to say, to help people to understand how this thing is not at odds with their believing in God and their worshiping Him on Sunday. And we kind of have to be sensitive and alert to uh, those those things happening, because we just never know. We just never know what's going to happen in the news, or in the in the neighborhood, or in the lives of some of our parishioners who whose presence in the church, I mean, the particular parish is such that if we don't speak about it, other people are going to think that somehow we're being cold-hearted.
Right, because Father, you've told us just a moment ago that you are fully invested and convinced that a homily can do amazing things, can do powerful things beyond what we can imagine. But without paying, if we don't pay this kind of attention to it and invest in it, it could also be a terribly missed opportunity, or in some cases can do damage, right? So the power, the potential of the homily, um, particularly in difficult situations, challenging situations, where the possible evangelical benefits for evangelizing are maybe even greater than normal, present themselves to you. This is a powerful call to the preacher to attend to his preaching carefully and with the advice of great preachers like you. Father, thank you so much for taking this time. Um, this is wonderful. Right now, Father is in Washington, D.C., preparing to go back to Rome to teaching homiletics in Rome to seminarians and all the other many 30-page things that he does. So, Father, I thank you for this time today. God
Thank you,
bless you.
Deacon Peter. It's been a joy to be with you. God bless you.